Hi everybody, this is Anne. One of the most popular ways to decorate pottery is by carving it. It can be as easy as randomly free-forming a design with a sharp object, but it can also be as elaborate and complicated as making complex measurements and purchasing expensive carving tools. In this video, I'm going to show you a third option. I'm calling it Faux Carving. It's a much faster and easier way to get a beautiful carved look without a lot of intricacies. And the best part is that you probably have the tools for these techniques around the house. For the first technique, I'll be hand building a mug. I rolled out a 1/4 inch thick slab and ribbed both sides. I have a template that I created that'll be perfect for this. I laid out the template on the clay and lightly traced around it so I know where I'll need to work. I'll want to add a little color first, so I'll be using some of my Amico velvet underglazes. You can choose whatever colors you prefer. Using just a regular craft paintbrush, I began applying each color in stripes. I was careful to do a little overlapping of colors but not make too many brush strokes so the colors will be overworked or turn muddy. Now here's the tool I'm using for this. It's just a notched grout spreader that you can get from any hardware store. I'll be using the medium notch side. I simply laid the teeth along the surface and gently dragged it straight across. I repeated this across the entire template. I wiped the excess underglaze away from the grout spreader. Now, I turned the tool so it was 90 degrees to the first set of lines and dragged the tool across those, creating a colored square pattern. Again, I cleaned away the excess underglaze and began making more crosses over those lines at random places, all the while making those lines at the same angles. You'll find some really cool patterns emerge. I needed the underglazes to dry a little bit. I used a hair dryer just until the underglazes lost their shine. So the clay wouldn't stick to the mat and it wouldn't stretch out, I placed a piece of plastic wrap under it. I replaced the template over the clay, then cut it out. I used a beveling tool to bevel one of the small side edges. I used an X-Acto knife to undercut the opposite small edge side so the two sides will fit together when I join them. I used the X-Acto to cut the excess plastic away from the edges. I scored both of the beveled sides really well and slipped one of the edges. The clay is really soft. Some clays will work better if you let them stiffen up a little before doing the construction, but this clay has more incidence of cracking when I wait, so I'll show you how to put this together when it's still soft. Notice I'm keeping my hands off the texture as much as possible so I don't damage it. I gently work the edges together, just barely touching that front edge, but doing more connecting along the inside. Because the clay is so soft, I put the piece over the styrofoam cone to get the form shape just right. Now I can work a small coil into that joint for extra security. Again, I'm trying not to touch the outer edge, but using a paintbrush. When the mug is dried, I can go back and paint that joint so it'll blend in. Another tip is to check the top and bottom edges of the mug body to make sure they're nice and straight while they're on the form. Cut them if you need to. I rolled out another slab and attached it to a banding wheel. I cut a circle from the slab, making sure it was bigger than the mug bottom. I slid the mug body from the cone form. The plastic on the inside of the piece comes in handy to help it slide off. I centered the body over the slab. I scored it, slipped it, then cut away the excess clay from the bottom. I then removed the plastic from the inside. I joined the bottom to the body and sealed up that seam. I added a coil to the inside seam and sealed that with a wet brush. Finally, I ran wet fingers around the rim to soften and round the top edge. I wired it away, and when it stiffened up, I added a nice handle. The squares will have a carved geometric feel to them, yet they're combined with your own sense of design. If you want to see the finished piece, keep an eye on the community section of our channel, where I'll post pictures of it. For the next technique, you'll just need a small hair comb. Again, I traced around my template so I know where to work. This time, I coated the entire slab with just one color, black. I put several coats on it. The comb I'm using is a smaller size with tinier teeth on one side and wider teeth on the other. Starting at one side of the slab, I just manipulated the comb from side to side in whatever pattern looked good to me. I kind of like those tiny waves. Notice how some of the teeth pick up underglaze and others don't, so that not only do you have carved lines, but the underglaze makes waves in patterns as well. Now here's one I made earlier. When it started to dry, I attached a handle. Doesn't it look like it took me a long time to carve each line? I like how the lines are thicker at the top and then they get thinner towards the bottom. Here's a faux carving idea that we've done before. This time, I rolled out a little thicker slab and stuck it down tight to the mat. I'm going to be using this wiggle wire. Now I purchased this one, but later I'll show you how to make your own. I simply held the wire flat and taut to the mat. I began sliding the wire under the slab while manipulating the wire back and forth. Now when I lift it up, I get this beautiful deep carved pattern. Now if you don't have a wiggle wire, I just used a piece of wire that I found in my garage. Leaving ends at the wire on both sides, I twisted the middle section around my needle tool. Now when I stretch out the wire, it's all kinked up and ready to use. As this wire's crimps are wider than the other wiggle wire, I made sure to use very soft clay so it'd be easier to slide under. I got a much bolder cut than the first wire. If you want more wire cutting ideas, check out the link above. Now here's one I cut earlier and made into a mug. I can see glazing that with a nice Celadon glaze so it'll break over the textured surface. All of these techniques looks like you spent hours measuring and carving each individual line, but in reality there was no measuring and no fussing. Each of them have such character and personality just like you would if you used an expensive carving tool. Thanks to the newest members of our Little Street Pottery Research Facility team. If you would like to join the team and earn a title, click on the Super Thanks button or the link to buy me a coffee. It also really helps us out if you hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. See you next time in the studio.